Hi, I am Krishnamurthy Pammi. In this session, we are going to discuss Agile Scrum. Taking Scrum Framework as reference, we'll flow through the Scrum Framework and understand Scrum roles and responsibilities, Scrum events and their insights, Scrum artifacts in detail. Let us understand Agile Scrum in detail now. So, you all know the rugby game. The rugby game is like, both the teams on the right side, the teams on the left side, they are positioned in the way the picture is depicted here. And in front of the referee, the ball is thrown underneath. Okay. The situation is where the ball goes, who will pick it up, we don't know. This is a context, even though the yellow shirt team person is holding the ball, okay, he thinks that the ball is picked up by his team, but we don't know. You see the position there. It's a completely unknown situation. The moment the ball is thrown underneath, who will pick up the ball, we don't know. Okay, the next one is, now immediately after the ball is thrown there, what happens? Somebody, the yellow shirt person, picks it up. But the other people, they are trying to put their energy on the white shirt person, thinking that he's picking up the ball. It's a completely unknown situation again. And then what happens is the white shirt person takes. The team with the white shirts picks up the ball, and the team with blue shirt is stopping him. And then what happens is the other team members goes and puts the ball into the court. So what is happening? It is completely from unknown situation to a known situation. So unknown situation is before the ball is thrown, we don't know who is picking up, which team is picking up. The only advantage is the person with yellow shirt, he is having the ball in hand, but ultimately when the goal is met, who will pick it up, we don't know. So this rugby game, these two snapshots if you take, from completely unknown situation to a known situation, we are traveling. In such situation, how do we convert the unknown to known? This is where the Scrum forms. The Scrum got originated by observing the rugby game. It is a framework within which people can address complex problems by adapting based on their experience creatively so that they can bring up the highest possible value. It's very lightweight, it's very easy to understand, very simple to understand, but it's very difficult to master. Again, I'm saying it is lightweight. The Scrum is easy and simple to understand, but it's difficult to master. Okay, so the Scrum says that, it asks you to first commit to a goal. Okay, with all focus you have, with openness. It says that, for the project to be successful, we all need to have the goal in mind, and we need to be open, and we need to have courage to an extent that we expect the respect. Again, I'm saying, you commit, your commitment, your focus, your openness, your courageousness towards meeting the goal, your courageousness to be open up and transparent about what is happening, your courageousness to focus as a team, your courageousness to meet the goal, your commitment, that's what gives you the respect. That's why if you see openness, courage, respect, focus and commitment together, they form the Scrum values. I have captioned this particular webinar as Agile Scrum. The reason is, what is Agile? Agile is ability to do things quickly and easily. Every Agile method is hosted on values, principles. The framework is developed based on the foundation. The foundation is principles and values. Because Scrum is part of Agile methodologies, it is also having the values. So if you don't follow these values, we can't achieve the best out of the Scrum framework. So the Scrum says, I am lightweight. The Scrum says, I am easy to be understood. But you have to make sure that you follow these values if you wanted to reap the benefits out of me, that is Scrum. That is what the Scrum is saying. Again, I repeat, if you want to reap benefits from Scrum, you need to be open. You need to first commit to the team goal. It's a team that matters, not the individual. The team need to have sufficient focus, full focus. It needs to be open about everything that is happening in the project towards the meeting project goal. It needs to have courage to talk it about it. Then only it expects the respect to individual and the team. So openness, courage, respect, focus and commitment together forms the Scrum values. If you achieve or if you follow these values, then only the Scrum framework is going to give, its intended benefits to us. So this is very important. So the Scrum is a development framework where you have cross-functional teams. What do you mean by cross-functional? Means the Scrum team is having all the abilities, all the skill set to meet the goal it has set for itself. So it's a development framework consisting of cross-functional teams, and it is iterative. It is iterative and it is incremental. It is structured in the cycles called sprints. What is sprint? Sprint is a fixed duration time periods. It consists of 1 week to 4 week duration. So the moment one team says, I follow a sprint cycle of 2 weeks, it means that every 2 weeks period is a sprint. Let us introspect why the concept of sprint is provided. If you take students, okay, if there is an examination at the end of 1 year, when they usually study, they study towards last 1 month. Certain people last 15 days, certain students, they study towards last 5 days or 4 days. Mostly the actual study is concentrated towards end of the year in an academic cycle. So by observing this, what the institutions have done, they structured it in terms of semesters every 6 months. What is happening is they put the study period in the lots of 6 months, so that people are now studying in the 6 months period. Earlier, when the study period was about 1 year, what was happening? People used to study in the 11th month and 12th month. But now, the moment we are putting it into a semester system where it consists of 6 months sprints, 6 months fixed periods. So in that 6 months semester system, students are studying in the 5th month and 6th month. Now, some universities, they are more versatile now and they're coming up with 3-month semester system, so that they are mandating students to have focus study at least in the 2nd and 3rd month. So if you observe this pattern, what we understand, when you have long sprints, people tend to work towards end of the sprint. When I say sprint, it's a fixed period. Now the Scrum says, look, I wanted to have a sprint that consists of 1 to 4 weeks. So the moment you define that I follow a sprint of 4 weeks, that means your fixed intervals of every 4 weeks. If the team or organization decides that, they follow a sprint of 1 week, that means every 1 week they have 1 sprint. So you can assume sprint as a fixed duration time box. But the thing is, if you decide your sprint duration is, let's say 2 weeks, that means you continuously will have 2 weeks sprints only. You can't change that period. Okay, this sprint I will have 2 weeks, next sprint I will have 3 weeks. No, it cannot. It has to be a fixed time interval, time box duration. It's called sprint. So usually we suggest sprint to have 2 weeks. The reason I told is the semester system itself. Because if you have 1 week sprint, it is too tight. Okay, it's too tight and too aggressive. If you have 4 week sprint, again, you tend to have real work happening towards 3rd and 4th weeks. So we tend to have sprints at 2 weeks intervals usually on the ground. But if you're having, a research project, on that research project, if it is difficult to bring out a tangible outcome at the end of 2 weeks, then we may suggest to have 3 week sprint or 4 week sprints. But usually 95% scenarios, we suggest 2 weeks time box duration called sprints. Now that you understood what is Scrum, let us understand Scrum Framework in detail now. So the Scrum Framework actually follows the sprint cycles. Okay, this Scrum Framework we are going to split into 3 parts. Number 1 is this part. That means inputs from end users, customers, teams and other stakeholders are being provided to product owner, and product owner is going to create product backlog. Okay, who is product owner? What is product backlog? We will see in detail. This is our first cut. The second cut of the framework is we will just go on development team. They actually conduct sprint planning meeting. It has 2 parts, part 1 and part 2, and they come up with sprint backlog. This is the second part we will see. The third one is the actual sprint cycle. The moment the sprint starts, the role of Scrum Master, there's daily Scrum meetings and artifacts used, and product backlog refinement session, and sprint review, potentially shippable in product increment and retrospective. So we are going to see this in 3 chunks. The differentiator of this session is generally whenever you follow any Scrum sessions, they say before introducing Scrum Framework, they'll say, okay, what are the roles and responsibilities of Scrum? And then they will cover the events, and then they cover the artifacts. But in this session, we are doing things differently. That means we are learning Scrum along with the Scrum Framework. Let us follow one by one now. The first cut is the inputs from end users, customers, teams, and other stakeholders are fed to the product owner. And the particular inputs are now documented under product backlog. What is product owner? And what is product backlog? These are the questions that are lingering on your brain, right? Especially for the people who are new to Scrum. Let us understand these 2 aspects now in detail. As I said, this is an introductory session, and here we are going to cover these concepts at high level. Let us first understand what is product backlog. The product backlog is an ordered list of requirements that is required to create the project or a product. So in usual projects, we call the word as requirements, but in Agile world, we call them as stories, user stories. So the user stories, they document requirement in a different fashion. So I'm just going to cover here. A user story is a lightweight mechanism to quickly capture requirements. So in waterfall model, we use the word called requirements, but in Agile world, we call the word as user stories. User stories are written in a template as a user. That means we talk about the role. I want a goal that I want to achieve so that I can do this benefit. Again, the user story is wonderfully woven format. In waterfall model, you only know the requirement, but you don't know who has requested it. You don't know what is the intended benefit out of the requirement. Because you don't know who has requested this or who is going to consume that particular requirement, what is the intended benefit, that particular capsule, just requirement, doesn't give full picture to the developer who is actually developing on the field. So user story is encapsulating 3 aspects. It says, as a user, I want this goal so that I can get this benefit. So it is the user story you have to write in a way that you can write in a sticky note. Why? Because by mandating the people to write user story in a sticky note, we are making them write crisp and clear requirement. Remember, the more crisp you are, the more clarity you are having on the requirements. That is why a sticky note is provided to the product owner or the team where they can see the user story. So whenever I am talking about user story, you have to assume this as a requirement, but the difference between requirement and user story is in user story, you have who is requesting this requirement, what is that requirement, and what is the intended benefit of the requirements are beautifully woven in a format that I have shown here. Okay, now each user story is having one acceptance criteria. The acceptance criteria is, given this condition, when a trigger happens, this is what I expect the requirements to function. So again, even for the acceptance criteria also, there is a different template given in Agile world. And each user story is given a sizing called story points. If you use Fibonacci series, the story points can be 0, 1, 2, 3, 5 like this. Okay, I have detailed this Agile user stories in a different video. That's let us write good Agile user stories. If you look at my channel, YouTube channel, this is one of the videos that has been viewed by so many thousand people. By 25,000 people have seen this video so far. So if for more details on how to write Agile user story, you can get on to my YouTube channel and you can click on let us write good Agile user stories so that you have a focused session there. But in this session, I'm going to just cover the concept called user story, where I wanted to tell you that user story is just not requirement. It also adds a flavor of who is requesting that requirement, what is that requirement, and what is the intended benefit of that requirement also you can see in that capsule. As a role or as a user, I want this goal so that I can achieve this benefit. Now, the beauty here is by documenting a user story in this template in a sticky note is we actually trigger more conversations within the team. So the sticky note is only having the user story at a precise level. But the moment it is put in front of the team, the conversation happens. What is the acceptance criteria of the user story? What is the size? How much size it is? Is it 3-story point, 5-story point? Right? Like this, how much complexity it is. Okay, the effort required, the risk involved, the complexity involved. Based on these 3 parameters, the sizing is arrived, which I have detailed in my video of let us write good Agile user stories. You can see it in detail with examples. And we also talk about what are the upstream dependencies. That means for me to take up this user story, I want my top level or these teams to complete their user stories. Only when they complete their user stories, I can actually take up this user story. What are the downstream dependencies? That means who are the people who are waiting on for me to complete this user story? What are the wireframes? What are the risks involved? Business perspective and technical perspective. What are the assumptions we are making at the time of discussing this user story? What are the constraints? How many pending clarifications are still there? So what I'm talking about is each user story should be in a position that we can complete in a sprint. Each user story should be sufficiently detailed. Each user story should be estimatable. And user stories can be evolving also because of certain pending clarifications. For now, we make certain assumptions, but if the assumptions are not true, then the user story can evolve into further user stories. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell is product backlog consists of user stories. That means it consists of the product backlog items. Product backlog items mostly are written in terms of user stories. Okay, it consists of features. That means it can be business features, technical stories, defects, knowledge management, knowledge improvement, enhancement. So anything in product backlog is only thing that team works. If some feature is not there in the product backlog, that means teams are not going to work on that particular requirement. So everything in product backlog, only team can focus it. If somebody comes up and asks you to work on certain thing that is not there in the product backlog, then we will not do. That's what Scrum says. Everything that is business features, technical features, defects, knowledge improvement, that means your training, your enhancements, everything that is required to meet the goal of a project, we need to have that in product backlog. So product backlog is an ordered list of requirements. It is ordered in such a way that product owner, who is product owner, I am going to talk about it little while. So these are ordered based upon business value, risks involved, dependencies, and date needed. So based on the urgency, priority, value, return on investment, these product backlog items, that means user stories, are clearly written and they are also ordered in that point of view. So this product backlog is a set of requirements for the team. So everything in the product backlog, only thing the team can work on. Anything that is not there in the product backlog, the team is not supposed to work on it. Okay, so for now you think about it, product backlog is an ordered list of requirements. Usually it is written in terms of user stories. Now, the second one is product owner. Who is product owner? Product owner is the business point of contact, product point of contact for the development team. That means product owner goes and talks to the business advisors. He goes and talks to the users. He goes and talks to different stakeholders. And he is the customer point of contact, user point of contact. He is the product facing in terms of requirements to the development team. So he is the sole person responsible for managing the product backlog. So he clearly expresses product backlog items. As I said, that each of the product backlog items should have a user story template, acceptance criteria, upstream dependencies, downstream dependencies, assumptions, risks, wireframes, whatever items that are required to detail those requirements or to detail those product backlog items. The product owner is the person, is a sole person who is responsible for clearly expressing those product backlog items to the development team. And then the product owner is also responsible for ordering the items in the product backlog to achieve best possible goals and mission. I want to tell you one scenario that product owner gives the set of prioritized user stories to the development team, and development team works the way the product owner asks them to work upon. And at the end of the day, after completing the project, the product did not provide the intended return on investment. Who is responsible? Development team is not responsible. It is the product owner, because it is the duty of the product owner to order the features, to order the user stories, to order the product backlog items in the order of the ROI, the highest ROI features, the highest customer satisfaction related stories. He has to prioritize upfront. The development team is responsible for providing quality of the stories, but return on investment is the duty of product owner. That is why he has to order the product backlog in a way that, the product backlog items are structured in the order of the return on investment. Now, he also need to make sure that the value of the work, that means what are the items with less work if we can get more business value. So that kind of optimization, he has to think about it. And then the product owner needs to make sure the product backlog is visible, transparent, and clear to all. Okay, so it is not that he keeps the product backlog in some environment where only limited people are having access. No, the product backlog should be visible, transparent, and clear, so that Scrum team can always look into it and everybody can have access towards it. And he need to ensure that development team understands the items in product backlog to the level that is required for them to understand. So the product owner can do this work either on his own or he can take the help of development team. So what does it mean? It means that the product owner can create user stories or product backlog items on his own, but he can also take development team support to create the user stories. For example, there are certain technical stories are there, functional stories are there, non-functional stories are there. So those things he may take the help of the team on the ground, but product owner is accountable for it. So he can take the help of the team, but the accountability lies with the product owner. And product owner is one person, not a committee. So if you have teams wherein 3 product owners, 4 product owners are there, please understand you are not in a prescribed Scrum or suggested Scrum way. Product owner is only one person. He is not a group of people. He is not a committee. So Scrum says there is only one product owner and no one is allowed to tell the development team to work from a different set of requirements. And development team is not allowed to act on what anyone else says. So product owner is the person who gives you the priority of requirements. Okay, he tells the order in which the team has to work upon it. He is one person. Okay, he is responsible for better return on investment. Okay, so he is responsible for optimizing the stories so that with less effort, more business value, what features we'll get, those things we need to prioritize. So for the product owner to succeed, the entire organization must respect his or her decisions. See friends, on the ground, we all say we are following Scrum, but if we don't empower the role, then you don't get the value out of it. So the organization or the management should show the commitment that product owner decisions are respected. Right? So this is what is expected out of product owner. Now let's recap. What did we understand so far? Product owner and product backlog. So what does the product owner says? He takes the inputs from end users, customers, teams and other stakeholders and he documents it in the form of user stories or product backlog items into product backlog. What is product backlog? Product backlog is an ordered list of your requirements. How the ordering is done, how to achieve better return on investment, how to achieve better business value, how to de-risk the project from customer dissatisfaction. So like this, keeping those parameters in mind, the product owner prioritizes the product backlog items. So the product backlog items are visible to all people. Okay, these are detailed in a way that teams are able to understand it. Product backlog items follow the principle of DEEP, D-E-E-P. D stands for detailed enough. Next, E stands for estimatable. That means each product backlog item should be detailed enough that people can understand. Then another E is estimatable. Every item should be estimatable. Okay, if it's having lots of assumptions, no, he has to rework and bring it back. Then the third one is evolving, because at this point in time, certain assumptions we make and then do estimation. But it may so happen that if the assumptions are not good, then this particular user story may get broken into further user stories. This way, it is called evolving. Then fourth one is each product backlog item should be prioritizable. That's why it's called DEEP. D stands for detailed enough, E stands for estimatable, E stands for evolving, and P stands for prioritized. So far we understand product owner and product backlog. The next one is this part. Okay, the product owner and product backlog we have seen. Now development team, and they select how much to commit by sprint end. So they conduct a sprint planning meeting, and it has the sprint planning meeting is having part 1 and part 2 aspects, and ultimately they arrive at sprint backlog. What is development team? What is sprint planning meeting? What is sprint backlog? These are the 3 questions that are lingering in our mind. Let us look at these three aspects in detail now. What is development team? Development team consists of professionals who do the work of delivering a potentially releasable increment of done product at the end of each sprint. My dear friends, at the end of every sprint, we deliver certain potentially shippable increment to customers. So that's called done work. So the development team consists of professionals who do the work of delivering a potentially releasable increment of done product at the end of each sprint. In simple words, at the end of sprint, we deliver working software, working product. Whoever is hands-on that working product, we call them as development team. Now, these development team are structured and empowered by the organization to organize and manage their own work. That means nobody will tell the development team how to do that particular work. Okay? Only the requirements will be told by the product owner in terms of user stories. But how to convert requirement into working product? We respect development team. And the organization has to empower their decision. Okay? That means if some other team comes and says, this is the way you have to do. Okay? No, then that is not the way. The Scrum team, they unfolds how to resolve, how to come from unknown to known, and we respect that decision or that skill set of development team. That is why the development team is empowered to manage their own work, and they are self-organizing. As I said, no one tells the development team how to turn product backlog item into a potentially releasable functionality. And development teams are cross-functional. That's why if you see, I put on the right side a good picture. Okay, it's a team. Here we are not identifying people in terms of individuals. We are identifying them in terms of a team. For example, in this scenario on the right side picture, we recognize team's effort and everybody wants the team to perform well. Likewise, on the field also, even though individually we may have different capabilities, we all align towards meeting our team goal. Now, there is no title other than developer. You are a tester, still you are called developer. Why? Because you are hands-on. Whoever is hands-on, they are called as developer. You may be architect, still you are called as developer. You may be a technical lead, still you are called developer. See, the point is whoever is hands-on in whatever roles you are putting, they are called as developers. So, individual development team members may have specialized skills and areas of focus, but accountability belongs to the development team as a whole. And the development team size is 3 to 9 members. Okay? The product owners, Scrum Master roles are not included in this unless they are also contributing in some way to the releasable software, releasable product at the end of the sprint. So friends, I come across situations wherein there are 15 people of a team coming and having a stand-up meeting. That is not correct. The more number of team members you are having within the Scrum team, the more interactions happens, the more complexity will be there in terms of managing those interactions. There is a formula called n into n minus 1 by 2. So those many potential communication channels will own where n equal to number of people in the team. So if you use that formula, you'll understand from 3 to 9 you can manage. If the number of team members n equal to 3 or n equal to 9, you can manage. But beyond 9, then the communication channels, the communication points will become more complex that it will be very difficult to manage them as a team. That is why the Scrum suggests that the development team size should be minimum 3 and maximum 9. Now, what is sprint planning? Because in our picture there we talked about, here if you see here, we talked about development team. We covered now. Now, this aspect, this is called sprint planning. Let us talk about it. Sprint planning. Okay. Sprint planning is a planning session you conduct at the beginning of the sprint. Okay. It has two parts, part 1 and part 2. sprint planning part 1, it tells what is required to be developed in this sprint or what is prioritized for the sprint. So in part 1 meeting, you will have a product owner, Scrum Master and development team. The product owner comes and says, guys, this is what I have prioritized for the sprint. And then team asks questions to them. Okay, what is the user story? What is the acceptance criteria? Am I clear about acceptance criteria or not? Am I clear about user story or not? What are the upstream dependencies? What are the downstream dependencies? What are the assumptions we are making? Okay, and what are the wireframes expected? Am I clear about it or not? Did I get everything from UX team or not? What are the constraints I'm having? So all those aspects, team asks the questions. That's called what session. In part 1, you actually ask the product owner. There will be a lot of conversations. Okay. So in part 2, okay, the product owner is only optional because now in part 1, they are clear about what is expected. In part 2, they go to the different room and they basically think about, okay, these are the user stories. How can I convert them into tasks? How can I sequence them? How can I estimate? And what is the the duration required for each task? How much effort these task is requiring, so that they total up task wise duration and they add up to user story. They come back to the product owner and say, look, you asked this to take up 5 stories. These 5 stories are taking, let's say, 100% out of us, but our capacity is only 80%, so we can only take 4 user stories out of it. So that decision is with the development team. So product owner can only say, this is the order in which the requirements need to be taken up. It is the development team who goes, estimates, comes back and say, in this sprint, I can only take these many user stories, and everybody in the organization, including the product owner, okay, they should respect it. That's why I'm telling you, the team, because of their values, because of their courageousness, openness, commitment and focus, they expect the respect from the organization. So when we enact those values, when we have that complete focus, and as a team, when we are committed, when we are courageous and we are transparent about the openness, and everybody on the floor has to respect this team, and they have to be enabled in such a way that, okay, for this sprint, even though the product owner is asking us or saying that, these 6 stories are important, I will only take these 4 stories, and everybody has to respect it. So what happens in sprint planning? 2 aspects will happen, part 1 and part 2. What is part 1? Part 1 is what? That means what is expected. That means these are the set of user stories, and this is what is expected to be done in its priority order. And in part 2, the development team goes and they break down the user stories into tasks. They come up with the estimated hours, or they total up and come back saying that these 5 user stories, whatever is product owner is asking. In this case, whatever is 5, I'm saying it's just an example. Okay, it is taking 100%, but my team is having only 80% capacity. So it is only 4 user stories I can take it up. So that decision is being taken by the development team, and those whatever they're circling at the end of the sprint planning part 2, that is called the sprint backlog. What is sprint backlog? Sprint backlog is the committed user stories, committed product backlog items by the development team, saying that they are saying, look, these are the list of user stories I am committing for my sprint. Okay. For example, if you take 2-week sprint, this set of sprint backlog user stories is what I'm committing. That's what the team says. Now this particular sprint backlog, you can see here each product backlog item, and they are being further elaborated in terms of the sprint tasks. And I'm using the word volunteer because as a team we are responsible. Who is volunteering to complete this task, and what is the estimatable effort against each task? And if you see here, number of days at the end of first day, second day, third day, fourth day, how many hours of work is still remaining on this task, so that we can see at the end of any given day how much work is still remaining for the sprint. Okay, so what I'm talking about, the sprint backlog is the committed work by the team for that sprint. Okay, so the moment the sprint backlog is available, that means the team is completely aware of user stories. The team they have splitted the tasks. They had enough technical analysis session at the beginning of the sprint, and they have committed for that particular user stories, whatever is there in the sprint backlog. So at the end of the sprint, the team is committed to deliver the user stories mentioned in the sprint backlog. So what is the difference between product backlog and sprint backlog? Product backlog consists of all items, whether you take within this sprint or next sprint, all the items that are required for the project. But sprint backlog only has the product backlog items that the team is committing in this sprint. I hope you are able to identify the difference between product backlog and sprint backlog. So friends, let's recap. So far what we have covered the product owner documenting the features into the product backlog. So the product backlog is having the all the product backlog items consisting of business features, technical features, defects, knowledge management. So yeah, whatever is required for the project. So whatever is there in the product backlog, only those items the team is going to work. Whatever is not there in the product backlog, the team is not going to work. So 100% anything team works should be within the product backlog. And then team goes for sprint planning. Okay, sprint planning is having two parts, part 1 and part 2. At the end of part 2, they come up with sprint backlog consisting of user stories and corresponding tasks. So that's what we have covered so far. Let's get into the third aspect. So this is the first aspect we have seen, then the second aspect we have seen, and then third aspect of Scrum Framework. Friends, so we are introducing new concepts now. Those are, who is Scrum Master? What is daily stand-up meeting? What is product backlog refinement session? What is sprint review? What is potential shippable increment and retrospective? Potentially shippable increment is the outcome that team is delivering at the end of the sprint. That we know. But what about Scrum Master? What about daily stand-up meeting? Let's learn these things in detail now. The Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is a parental figure in family system. He's a servant leader. He's a coach. The way the mother in a family, the father in a family, okay, they act for the upbringing of child. Okay, they are servant leaders. Whatever skill they have, they wanted to put towards their children to make sure that children comes, in a good way. So likewise, Scrum Master also, if he is having a development background, he tend to provide suggestions to development team. If he is coming from testing background, he basically tend to help the testing team, or he tend to provide suggestions for testing team. Suggestions only. He is a servant leader. With whatever skills he has on his back, he wants to help the team. And that helping is not just towards development, testing or product. It is also like AC is not working, or food items people require. Anything that makes team to work with focus, he'll work on it. He'll make sure that during the sprint, the team is not disturbed. They're working with required values, with required courageousness, with required transparency, with required commitment, okay, with required openness. So he's a servant leader. He's a coach to make sure that the team understands the Scrum in its own spirit, and the team is actually implementing the Scrum, and he ensures that. And he removes the impediment. In Agile world, people use the word impediment. Impediment is like blockers. Okay, the blocker can be within the team or outside the team. So the Scrum Master makes sure that those impediments, like the setup is not working, the infrastructure is not proper, or whatever it is. There can be some visible things or invisible things, or dependencies on other team. He tends to note those things and make sure that he works towards resolving it. And he facilitates Scrum events, and he facilitates communication, proper communication, making sure that Scrum values are, practiced in its spirit. And he helps the product owner in identifying effective technique in terms of coming up with good prioritization. And he is a change agent within the team to improve the productivity. So he's a coach. and he serves the organization also in leading and coaching the organization in its Scrum adoption. So Scrum Master is a very good role, okay, provided the management gives due respect to this role. Okay, it's a beautiful role. Okay, now we come across on the field saying that no, one Scrum Master for 3 teams, one Scrum Master for 4 teams. No, it cannot work. I want to ask a question saying that in today's world, one wife, one husband and 2 children. Do you think they are able to take care of the needs of 2 children? They are really struggling. Similarly, if you want to do a proper Scrum Master role for one team itself, you are fully occupied. But then guys, the Scrum Master needs to be a real servant leader. He needs to be a real coach. He needs to expect the respect by virtue of the great work he is doing towards the team. And mostly the Scrum Master work is invisible. Okay, visible work is only the team's work. It's invisible work. But unless parents do their job, children may not succeed. Similarly, unless Scrum Mastering is properly done, the team may not be able to perform. That's why, my dear friends, Scrum Master is a great role. Okay, and it has to be recognized by the organization. The next one is daily Scrum meeting. The daily Scrum meeting is a 15 minutes time boxed meeting. It's a 15 minutes. It has to finish within 15 minutes. You can ask, how come within it can get completed in 15 minutes? Yes, we only talk about dependencies here. What are we going to talk here? Every member comes to the task board here where you see what are the to-dos or what are the tasks that are in progress, what are the tasks that are done or documented with respect to each user story. And they will say, each of them will say, what did I do yesterday that helped the development team to meet the sprint goal? What will I do today to help the team to meet the sprint goal? Do I see any impediment in my journey? So 3 things each of them should do. What did I do yesterday? What will I do today? Do I see any impediments or do I have any dependencies? So at the very high level, we agree upon it. Any detailed discussion, we need to take it out. So in daily Scrum meeting, you basically agree on the high level dependencies so that the team actually finishes all their updates and progress in 15 minutes. If you keep talking about dependencies in detail, it will be very difficult to get a meeting completed in 15 minutes. So Scrum says within 15 minutes you have to complete. This is where proper Scrum Mastering comes. You come across certain dominated people on the ground who, if they start, they won't stop. So Scrum Master has to cut them in a very nice way without hurting them, saying, can we take it offline? Or do you think it's good if we discuss it offline? So likewise, the Scrum Master has to ensure that everybody completes their daily update. What did I do yesterday? What will I do today? Do I see any impediments? So likewise, they discuss. And after the Scrum meeting, they can take up the separate in-depth discussions with required people. So the daily stand-up meeting, it has to start on a fixed time. It has to start on a fixed place. Okay, and a Scrum Master is responsible for ensuring that the daily Scrum meeting is happening. But the development team is responsible for ensuring that they update each other. It is not that the development team should update Scrum Master. No, development team is updating to themselves because as a team they are responsible for the sprint goal. Scrum Master only ensures that Scrum meeting is happening. It is within the 15 minutes and everybody is talking in the way the structure is given. So he is like an observer and facilitator there. But if you come across situations wherein team updating the Scrum Master, that is not a good scenario. I have another video in my YouTube channel. You can see where I have documented 20 reasons how daily Scrum meeting can go wrong. Okay, so daily Scrum meeting, if you observe, it's an excellent heartbeat. You can understand the heartbeat of a team by just observing the 15 minutes from outside. So you can look into my YouTube channel and you can see the daily stand-up meeting, the heartbeat of Agile Engine for more details. Okay, let's get on to the information radiators. The team is having the information radiators in their team room What is that? Sprint burn down. If you see on the x-axis, it is having the number of days that is available on a sprint. And if you see here, the remaining effort. So sprint burn down says, okay, on a day 1, if you see here, 85 hours of work is there. Okay, so there is a red line here that's called ideal bar. Okay, so just we'll say starting point is 85 on the day 1, ending point is 0 at the end of the sprint, and we just connect it. It's like an ideal line. Now the blue line is what the team is achieving. That means they come to the stand-up on the first day. After completion of sprint planning, they understand that 85 hours of work is remaining. The next day they come back here, they look at the task completed, how many hours still remaining to be completed. It says 80. Third day they come, it is, let's say, 75. Fourth day they come, it's 70. So likewise, if you see, the blue bar tells about, how the remaining effort in real time is happening. So the ideal bar and the real bar. So basically always sprint burn down tells you the number of hours, okay, still remaining to be completed in that sprint. This is one of the information radiators the team uses on the ground. The next one is working agreements. The working agreement is basically within the team members, team actually documents. These are the working agreements. For example, everybody has to come on time to the stand-up meeting, or people have to follow these kind of minimum agreements, so that as a team we function more collectively, more productively. So working agreements is the working agreement the team does within themselves to make sure that any negativities they can set them aside. For example, somebody is putting some audio and he comes back and then says, boss, when you come to the meeting you have to be on time and you should not look at laptops. You have to be 100% focused. So like this team, it's not somebody tells, it's team. They form certain agreements and everybody provide their commitment that they follow this agreement. So they creatively creates this agreement in such a way that they connect to the best part of the other. This way they come up with more innovatively, more productively, their productivity is become more. So working agreement is the agreement set by the team by themselves to make sure that they cover the scope aspects, people, tools, okay, and the environment, the context. From all the perspective they form the working agreements and people have to follow it. People can modify the working agreement with due discussion within the team, but those working agreements need to be adhered by one and all. The second one is definition of done. Somebody comes and says, I have done this, I have done this. What does this mean? So they basically write down list of the moment you say one task is completed, that means the functionality is developed, unit testing is done, functional testing is done, regression testing is done, and then it is actually available in so and so environment. Then only I consider something as done. So that is the definition of done. They put it on the board and visible to everybody, so that in a stand-up meeting, whenever somebody says it is done, that means all those criteria are done. So we don't need to express, did unit testing completed? Did you sign off on functional testing? There is no need to talk about it. The moment team agrees on definition of done and it is labeled in front of the team in their team room, that means anybody says something is done, then those certain points need to be adhered. Then only we call them as done. For example, just to make you more clear for the freshers, for example, somebody says, I completed this chapter. This means I completed the chapter. I covered all the previous examination questions. I completed the textbook. I completed the main suggested guides. And I have cleared all the assignments into it. So then only I consider something as done. Like that, definition of done is the bar set by the team itself to ensure proper quality is coming up. So working agreements and definition of done are another the information radiators team puts on the team room. Then let's get on to the product backlog refinement. What is product backlog refinement? Product backlog refinement happens in the mid of the sprint. That means, see, as I said, product backlog is following DEEP, D-E-E-P. D stands for detail enough. Another E stands for estimatable. Another E stands for evolving. That means then the last one is prioritizable. P stands for prioritizable. So the third E, D-E-E-P, the third E is actually talking about evolving. Yes, the product backlogs certain things we consider them as important at the beginning of the project. But when you come during mid of the project, you don't consider them as important. So you may wanted to, deprioritize them. You wanted to prioritize some other features, or you wanted to, split some of the user stories because you now got more intelligence, more information into it. So how do we do it? The Scrum says during mid of the sprint, usually reserve some amount of time. The time should be no more than 10% of the capacity of the team. Reserve that time, and there you focus only on reprioritization of the features that are picked up for next sprints, not in this sprint. That means in product backlog refinement, you focus on for future sprint related stories. If you can able to do the product backlog refinement session where you deprioritize, you split the stories, you make sure the prioritization is current, you come up with more analysis wherein each user story is clubbed with the corresponding acceptance criteria, upstream dependencies, downstream dependencies, wireframes, assumptions and constraints, then the effort required for sprint planning will be very minimal. Usually in a matured Scrum, 80% of the stories are actually groomed under previous product backlog refinement sessions. So by the time you come for a sprint planning session where you are going to pick up stories for the upcoming sprint, 80% of the stories we must have already discussed the past. How you come across it? You come across this because this is the product backlog refinement event. This event, we are giving you the time for you. Okay, that time you focus on the stories, detailing of the stories that are required for future sprints. Also, the product backlog is always kept current. So generally to a product owner, if some stakeholder says, can you take up this user story? Then, he uses product backlog refinement session and he asks team to analyze it. So whatever user stories you are grooming or you're discussing during product backlog refinement session, they are not labeled for that sprint. It is for future sprint. So the product owner will get an idea of how much size that user story is. Forget about when are we going to take it up. But at least he'll come to an idea, okay, complexity is like this, size is like this. So basically a product backlog refinement session is an opportunity for the product owner to basically make sure that he takes up the user feedback and he incorporates it into product backlog. He takes the time of the team, he takes the inputs from the team, and he makes sure that user stories are properly detailed, sliced, and it is kept ready for future sprints, and product backlog is always current. So product backlog refinement session is for the stories that are targeted for upcoming sprints. That is why product backlog refinement session is happening during mid of the sprint, because there is no pressure on the team. If you are actually conducting this session during end of the sprint, that means team is actually having a pressure of completing the objective they are working. That's why during the mid of the sprint, that means if it is a 2-week sprint, at the end of first week, you have this product backlog refinement session. Okay. The next one is sprint review. So at the end of the sprint, what happens is team inspects and they adopt. That means, okay, we are at the beginning of the sprint, during sprint planning, we committed for this particular sprint objective or sprint goal. Okay. Are we on top of that or not? Where are we? For example, in our example, we have taken 4 user stories. Team has said 4 user stories they are going to complete. Did they complete all the 4 user stories as per the acceptance criteria that is labeled for them at the beginning of the sprint during sprint planning meeting? So here it is more of a discussion forum in a more understanding way. It is not like a police officer meeting. Like product owner comes along with the users and he sees the working software. Means here it is not the words, it is not imagination, it is the working software, working product that need to be demonstrated to the product owner. And the product owner uses this opportunity to showcase that particular working product to the required users also. He might invite users also. That's why sprint review, people have to do a preparatory meeting for it. If the team is coming to sprint review directly, they may fail because suddenly some data may not work, some setup may not work, some platform may not work, the required software may not work in its own intended way. then that creates a negative impression about the outcome of the sprint. That's why we suggest that before sprint review, the team has to, they have to spend some time making sure setup is available, test data is available, and the features are working. Okay, we can demonstrate in this way. So the moment they do a good preparation and they come to sprint review meeting, there will be discussions in an understanding way. For example, out of the 4 user stories, let us say 3 user stories are actually meeting the acceptance criteria. Then the 4th user story, product owner has to say, look, why do you think you could not complete? Then the team has to come up with the corresponding reasons. So likewise, whatever team is telling openly and transparently, product owner need to understand whatever is the business impact the product owner is having because of not completing this particular feature by end of the sprint. The team has to understand. It is like a mutually understanding context. One understands the other context, and then they will take a decision. Okay, out of 20 story points, 15 story points is what team have completed. So 15 is what we are circling it out, and then the next question is these remaining stories. Okay, remaining whatever is not completed, the product owner will take a decision whether to prioritize in the next sprint or upcoming sprint, because he is driven by ROI, return on investment, or business priorities. What is sprint retrospective? Sprint retrospective is inspect and adopt. So in sprint retrospective, team, Scrum Master, product owner is optional. Okay, so basically it inspects, what are the things that we should start doing, what are the things that we should stop doing, what are the things that we should continue doing. So what is going well, what is not going well, what we should start doing. So likewise, the team inspects. Usually team manager is not available. He should not be present in the team sprint retrospective, because in the presence of authoritative people, the team members may not be willing to share the real facts. That's why we need to leave the team in free environment. Then only the proper ideas will come. So at the end of each sprint, there will be a sprint retrospective. This retrospective will cover not only the scope part of it. It covers functionality, it covers people, it covers tools, it covers the environmental aspects also. So covering all the things and innovation also, team members inspects how did the sprint went, and what are the things that we are learning, and what is the thing that we wanted to adopt for the upcoming sprint. So friends, I'm telling you, there are so many people issues that are coming, we usually witness on the field. But if you actually facilitate retrospective properly, and you can actually bring out the points from the team saying that what went wrong with respect to people perspective, what should continue, what good practices should continue, what we should start doing. So it's just not on the scope functionality targeted or sprint goal targeted. From people perspective, from the scope perspective, from the tools perspective, from the environmental aspect perspective, from the organization context perspective, from the innovation perspective, the retrospective can be facilitated creatively. That's why I said you need a very good Scrum Master to ensure that Scrum events are being performed by the team in its intended spirit. So friends, let's recap. What did we observe so far? In this particular context, we say what is sprint? It's a fixed time box duration. Okay, once you say I am following 2 week sprint, you should follow 2 week sprint throughout your project journey. Okay, in fact, all organizations have a fixed sprint schedule. Okay, we have discussed about product backlog refinement, which you take it up during mid of a sprint. And then who is Scrum Master? Scrum Master is like a parental guide. He's a facilitator, he's a servant leader, he's a coach. He helps to the fullest of his capacity to make sure that teams are undisturbed during the sprint, and the team understand the Scrum events in their intended way and they follows it. Okay, we talked about daily Scrum meeting. It happens for 15 minutes. It is like a heartbeat of the team, and if you observe the daily Scrum meeting, you can actually get more explicit and implicit observations. And what is potentially shippable increment? potentially shippable product increment is the outcome that is produced by the team at the end of the sprint. Now, it should be in line with the sprint backlog. Now, this is what we do in the review. The sprint review, whatever is there in the sprint backlog, those user stories, and we basically evaluate the corresponding acceptance criteria, and we do a demo to product owner, and based on that, they basically do a review. Now, after this, there will be a retrospective wherein people retrospect based on what went right, what did not go right, and what can improve. So these are the things we have understood. Now friends, let us recap the Scrum Framework. The Scrum Framework says the product owner takes inputs from end users, customers, team, and other stakeholders, and he puts into product backlog in terms of product backlog items. The product backlog items are, it can be business functionality, technical functionality, defects, knowledge management, and everything. Everything in the product backlog only team works. Anything that is not there in the product backlog, team will not work. Product backlog is a living document. It follows DEEP principle. DEEP means detailed enough, estimatable, evolving, and prioritized. Each feature need to be clear. The product owner is responsible for making sure that the product backlog is prioritized in the order in which the business will get more return on investment. They reap more productivity. For less effort, more business value is coming. So the product owner is accountable for ensuring that the product backlog items are ordered in its priority way, and it is visible, clear to the Scrum team. Now, after the product backlog items are sufficiently detailed, of course it's an evolving document, the team heads for sprint planning meeting. The development team, Scrum says, anybody who is hands-on on the potentially shippable product increment at the end of the sprint is called development team. The development team is having only one title, that is called developer. So whether you may be architect, whether you may be tester, all of them are given a title called developer. Scrum team is accountable as a team, and individuals contribute to the sprint objective in their best capacity. Now they come for sprint planning meeting. It is having two parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1, it says what to develop. The product owner explains the number of user stories that are prioritized for the sprint. During the sprint planning part 1, the development team understands what is user story, what are the acceptance criteria, what are the upstream dependencies, what are the downstream dependencies, what are the assumptions, what are the wireframes required, what are the pending clarifications. Now, by having proper conversations during sprint planning part 1, they understand what to be developed. Then they head for sprint planning part 2. After understanding what to be developed, they go to sprint planning part 2. They understand the technical analysis and they convert user stories into tasks. They sequence them, they estimate them, they come up with the effort required to complete those user stories. And they come to the product owner and say, look, we can commit to these many number of user stories for the sprint, and that is called a sprint backlog. Sprint backlog is the goal the team as a whole, the team as a team is committing. And the sprint backlog consists of the sprint user stories and corresponding tasks. Now, with the sprint backlog in hand, where the team has committed for the sprint goal, they head for the sprint. The sprint is usually a 2 weeks period fixed time box duration. Whatever is the time duration we set for the sprint, the team has to follow it throughout the journey. Usually, organizations have fixed time scale sprints. Now, during the sprint cycle, you have everyday daily stand-up meeting using information radiators like task board, sprint burndown. You will basically understand where the team is heading. The Scrum Master is responsible to ensure the team is understanding the Scrum in its spirit, and he makes sure that he acts as a servant leader. He helps the team so the team is not disturbed during the sprint, and he ensures that he helps each of them on the ground to his best capacity so that team is motivated, committed enough towards completing the sprint goal. Now, during the mid of the sprint, you have a product backlog refinement session. The product backlog refinement session, you detail user stories that are required for future sprint. If you can do product backlog refinement session effectively, your sprint planning session for the future sprints will be more easy, because by that time, the team must have already detailed most of the stories as part of the product backlog refinement session. As part of product backlog refinement session, you basically revisit the priorities, you deprioritize whatever is not required, you split the user stories, all those kind of things you do, where product owner and teams are together work in collaborative way, wherein the product backlog is always kept current. Now, at the end of the sprint, you have potentially shippable product increment. This potentially shippable product increment is in line with the sprint backlog. So it may happen that team may complete all the user stories they have committed, or it may so happen that they could not complete some user stories because of some genuine reasons. During the sprint review, the product owner and team discuss those challenges in detail, in a collaborative way, in an understanding way. Team has to take sprint review meeting more seriously, because the product owner may call or may invite the users also to the sprint review, because in the sprint review, the potentially shippable product increment is a working software. It is not the discussions, it is not the imaginative discussions, it's working software, working product is what to be shown here. Now, after the review is over, now team goes in a cordial manner where they can actually exchange their opinions in a free way. They conduct a retrospective of how their last sprint happened. The retrospective is towards the progress they made, the people perspective, tools perspective, environment perspective, and innovation perspective. The Scrum Master is a parental figure. He ensures that team understands the Scrum in its spirit. And he is a servant leader. He is a coach. And he shows all his talent to make sure the team is not disturbed during the sprint. This is what the Scrum Framework talks about. So, you have now understood what is Scrum Framework, Scrum roles and responsibilities, Scrum events and their insights, Scrum artifacts in detail. I thank your interest to learn, and I look forward to add more value add sessions in future. Thank you.